Alright everybody, how's it going today? I'm not going to beat a dead horse on this one, but while this subject is on my mind, I'd like to talk about it. So I'll drop a little incense on here and begin my chat. I just finished making a video chatting about herbs and random things, and really I originally intended to talk about this list here. I'm not too shy to admit I took notes. I definitely won't read off a cue card, but having notes definitely helps me when I want to make a point. And I hope people will be open to this and receptive to the idea that I'm trying to convey here, because it's definitely not a... I'm not making any solid conclusions here about one side or another. And I made a video earlier that was somewhat about politics and our thoughts, and I want people to know that I'm open to criticism, and I'm also open to discussion and the other view. For example, like most of my subscribers know that I despise Donald Trump. And some people will totally attack me and say, you're a dumbass, you're a shitball, you're a cunt, whatever they want to say. And other people will say, well, I support Trump and this is why. And then we'll have a civil discussion about it, and I can understand that. And while we might be frustrated with each other's opinions, generally we might come to a consensus that, oh, you don't support Hillary either. And I'm stuck in a rut. And politically, for example, I do not like Donald Trump at all because I don't like him as a person. And I do not like Hillary Clinton either. My thought is that people are going to vote however they are forced to vote in a lot of regards on this election. But it's going to be, the intention of all the people is the same. This is what I'm getting at. All the people want the same thing. They want a better life, and they want their lives to be fulfilled. They think that the government's going to be able to provide a better future for them and the country by certain decisions a leader might make. You know, I care about my world. I do. And I know that people sometimes don't care about other nations, and I can understand that we want to have a certain attachment to our home land, and that think we should protect that, you know, above all others. And I do share that to an extent. I do understand that we need to protect ourselves first. Just like you would protect yourself first, or you would protect your family first, let's just say. Because the one thing is that people are selfless. They do sacrifice their lives for others. There's altruism all the time. And people might say, well, a person might do something for another because it makes them feel good and that they could benefit from that. But sometimes people risk their lives to save a stranger. And that doesn't make any sense. It shows that there's a strong empathy and understanding within people. Which brings me to the reason why I think we have such problems in the world right now. It's not because of the right-wingers or the left-wingers, conservative or liberals, or the progressives, or the... It's none of these people. It's single individuals within all groups. The sociopaths, the psychopaths. They're very difficult to distinguish. I would say psychopath would be the description I'd prefer. Because, you know, I've heard them used interchangeably, but let's just forget about which path it is and say it's the kind of person who has no feelings, no empathy, all right? The person who doesn't understand that others have needs and feelings too. And there are a lot of people and like that. And the research says that, you know, 1% of the population generally, and this has been consistent throughout history, 1% of the population has been considered to be psychopathic. And you may think, well, 1%, that's not too much. And no, it's not the same 1% that's rich, because there are many great people who are rich that share and are kind too. It's not that a person who's wealthy just doesn't have emotion. And there are a lot of psychopaths who are dirt poor too. It's a matter of individuals who don't care what others think or feel. These are the people who can make decisions for entire countries, entire continents, based on how they feel inside or what they think is right, but not understanding the emotions of others and the needs of others. They seem to be oblivious to this. And there was a time when people were allowed to flourish like this, and say like back in the, you know, the early days of civilization, there were times when food was really scarce and we had to really scrape. And during that time, the psychopaths were always well known in society. And they had different ways. Each community has a different way of dealing with them. The Inuits would actually, if they found somebody had psychopathic tendencies within their clan, they would take them on a hunt, and then when they got to the cliff by the sea, they'd push them off the cliff. And who knows how many other societies dealt with things in their own way. But when times are slim, and there's one person who will take from you or steal because they don't care about other people's needs, it needs to be dealt with. And it kind of leads me to a question somebody asked me earlier. Do you think that there's certain people who would be better off dying in this world, or to be killed, or to have some way of eliminating the people who are bad? And of course my first thought was yes, but it's impossible. Like somebody else said, we tried that. Look at American execution policy. We execute the wrong people sometimes. Or, what's worse, is the people who make the decisions as to who goes are the people with the money to perpetuate their lies and bullshit in order to make others look bad. So the right people, the people who are really doing the damage, always have enough backs to cover their asses. And so there are a lot of different needs for people, and what affects us is what we speak up on. That's an important thing to remember. If you have somebody in your family who died from cancer, you might be an advocate for cancer research. If you have somebody who died from radiation poisoning, you may be against nuclear power. If you had someone who died in a coal mine, you might be completely against fossil fuels, but not for the reason of the environment, but subconsciously because of what happened to you or someone you know. There are a lot of reasons that we hold the opinions we do. We can't deny that. I mean, we do our best to try to be fair and to close our eyes and say, okay, what is the best decision? But it's always based on what we have learned before. And we jump to conclusions rather than re-evaluating our position every time, every day. I know I'm guilty of it, and I try. And I know a lot of other people are guilty of it too. It's not guilty. I guess that's not the right word, because guilt implies that it's something that we should be ashamed of. I would say that it's something that's inherent within all humans, that we just share, and that we try to better ourselves. But the psychopath has no desire to better himself. The psychopath cares about nothing but the bottom line. And what happened is, in the modern industrial era, what we did was we started to cherish what we considered the value of wealth, of power, prestige, of being recognized. And the psychopaths jumped right on that. And you have to understand, somebody said there are no philosopher kings, because no good man ever wants to be king. And this is carried on through many, basically every part of society is infiltrated with people who are in power merely because they want power, okay? And they're in every corner of our society. They want power because it makes them feel good about themselves. Whereas the people who could really lead tend to go, I don't want to deal with that crap. I don't want to deal with people. Because I know how people really are, and I don't want to get all emotionally attached and involved there. And I have other things to think about and do. But the person who, gains wealth just so they can feel powerful, there are a lot of them out there. And they have a lot of power, and they have a lot of money. But a couple of the things that I wanted to mention here were the classical versus the romantic voter. Now, I'll try to post the video on YouTube, the link. The School of Life is one channel I watch. It's just a guy he's a writer, an author, but he does these little little animations, 3 or 4 minutes long, which holds my attention. And basically, it's been about philosophers, about ideas and values and whatnot. But there's one about classical and romantic voters. You should check it out. Basically, the quick version here was that the classical voter tends to see things can be grim, and see the darker side in people, and see things as they really are, but they're the ones that prefer slow-moving institutions, which means slowed down government or not big changes. In other words, the opposite of what you might call a progressive, although progressive has changed over the last century. It used to mean something totally different. But after considering that point, I asked myself, not how do I disagree with that, but why would I agree with that if I did? And I would say, okay, that makes sense. If there's too many changes too quickly in a government, it's easy for people to come in and fill the voids and take over. It can go either way, I guess, but I can see the point. The romantic voter, on the other hand, tends to think things will get better tomorrow, that we can just change the world if we just do this one thing, or that from the description, they tend to be more black and white in their thinking, as that there is a solution to this problem, and that people can be chosen for specific things, and we can know for a fact if a person's guilty or whatnot, that there are answers, basically. And, they tend to be a dreamer. It can be a good way, but it can also be shallow thinking instead of really digging and picking things apart. Both of these, they can both relate to liberal or conservative values too, but they're all intertwined. They're all interchangeable. That's what I'm trying to get across here. That you're not a liberal or a conservative. You're a human being with your own opinions. So we have to stop doing this. We have to stop thinking we're on one side or the other. I've had 2 guys come to my door in the last week and ask me how I'm going to vote or how I would vote if this happened tomorrow. And I'm like, I don't know. It depends on the issue. They're like, would you vote for this Republican? I'm like, probably not, but maybe. It just depends on the situation. Generally, I don't share their values, but it may be a better option. And sure, I know that people say, well, you do have to pick sides. You have to choose one. Because otherwise you're just, bullshitting yourself by thinking you could vote independent because it never made a difference. This may be true to an extent. I understand that. Sometimes you have to pick the lesser of the 2 evils, but also sometimes you have to make a point. So more people make a point, and more people make a point, to where maybe we can have a 3-party system in another election or 2. Is it possible? Why not? But I don't think that the parties are the problem. I think that it's the people's associations to one party or another, and the idea that they're right and everybody else is wrong, and that's just the way it is. And that's a difficult thing to overcome. There is no black and white in most issues. And if we think of that we're right and our side is right, we're assuming that half of the population is wrong, okay? Elections are close. They're always close. No matter how much Trump or Hillary think they're ahead, in the end it'll probably be pretty close. It always is, because people are that closely divided on the issues. And these are important issues to both sides. Some people believe that immigration is the problem. Some people really believe that, a woman shouldn't have the right to choose. And all these hot topics that, some people believe building a wall between us and Mexico is going to stop anything. But I just see the cost in dollars. But I also see that the people that live by the border have a different opinion of it. And they say, hey, you don't live down here, and you don't know how bad it could be. But on the other hand, they're not realizing that while their small area may have problems, in the bigger picture, the rest of the nation is generally fine. And that immigration is not as big of the issue as the corruption of our actual government agencies and the printing of money and the Federal Reserve and all the problems that we have. The real problems are due to inflation and false promises by politicians. So if we could come together on both sides, because if many of the Republicans could realize that you're not really Republican, that you may be just repeating what you've heard or following, the best that your parents did. I have a good friend who, used to call himself a conservative, and I would just, we'd argue and argue and argue all the time, but we're still great friends, It was like, eventually now he considers himself a liberal. He's always posting all this stuff about, stopping this or that. And he posted something the other day about a group, that their idea is to eliminate religion, and because they think that it's this, because of what it's doing. Basically, it was more of separating religion, church and state, which I do agree with completely, that church should not be involved in state at all. Completely. I mean, separate, because there are so many different values and religions. But I had to tell him, I'll be the devil's advocate on this one and say I agree with you that it's a big problem, but you have to realize that if there's even one iota of an idea to convince other people not to believe in things, or that God is wrong or their religion's wrong, instantly it loses interest with me, because people have to live the way they want to and believe what they want. You're never going to force others to stop believing in something they believe in. And it's okay for people to be religious. A lot of people, a majority of the world is religious. So atheists thinking they're going to change that, doesn't do anything. But I looked at both sides, and I'm able to understand where people are coming from on each issue. When we have a loss of power in our country, as individuals and as a group, when we feel like our points don't count and that we're not heard, then we lose interest in politics. And it was Aristotle that said we are political creatures, that mankind, humans, are political creatures by nature, and we desire structure and organization, and that we by nature want a hierarchy. We're not apes. We descended from common ancestors. We have common relatives, but we're not apes. Yet, all apes